Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Potter's House and our ongoing weekly review of the church lie. Okay. A few things to go over here. I want to remind everybody that they can go to tank.online and look over some upcoming events that we have coming up. And I'm going to go to the Tank Conference 2019 coming up, the complete understanding of church, its doctrine of salvation, its true history, its character, its politics. Okay? And Susan, and you can go there, and get to that through our ministry hub. Okay. Let me see here. What else do we got? I just want to mention that Susan is working real hard on her talks and is going to do, if you remember some of her in-depth stuff on the history of the Puritans and Augustine and Luther and Calvin and some of those great series that she did. She's presently doing a lot of research on Origen and will be doing a series of talks on the Church Fathers. I don't know, I think she's going to focus primarily on Origen, and I think has already read 2 or 3 books on Origen. And so again, thank you for joining us. We are reviewing The Church Lie and the Biblical Alternative by Andrew Young and Paul Dosey. And integrating with that review whatever is trending in Churchland. You can ask questions, make comments by joining us on our Facebook page, The Church Lie, or email us at mail@tank.online. Okay, tank.online. Mail at. Okay, so we're going to get going today, and let's go back to if you go back to the blog, all right, and see where I've posted our links for today, you can go to got the live link there. Of course, you can open that up in another page. The archives is the Church Lie 11 Theses channel. You can buy the Church Lie online. The link is there. Read it for free online, and that link is there as well. So we are kind of hunkered down and sidetracked on this whole business of the ark. Let me kind of focus this in a little better here. That's the reason I posted everything on the blog, is so that you can be sure to see it. I know this isn't all that visible on the live streaming, okay? And we're going to be working on that to make it more visible. Our setup upstairs, you can see it like you're in the same room, and we need to do that same kind of work here. So, what our thesis is today and the reason we're getting hunkered down on this art thing is the whole answers in Genesis and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, which is the big multi-million-dollar complex where people come from all over the world, and they're building a complex there with hotels and this, that, and the other, and it's supposedly an apologetics for the faith and a defense of the book of Genesis. All kinds of problems there. And the more you study this whole business of the ark as interpreted literally from the Bible, the more, unfortunately, you see Ken Ham in this whole Answers in Genesis thing as just a huge fraud. And the one link I didn't post is the Ark Encounter website. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and bring that up, and I'm going to Google it, and we're going to put the Ark Encounter. Okay, enter. Let's do Ark Encounter. Okay. There appears to be the actual website. Okay. Bigger than the imagination, blah, blah, blah. Let me see. Explore Bible history. See inside the ark. State-of-the-art exhibits, indeed. You can buy tickets, and then we've got all kinds of pictures. Yes, indeed, it's beautiful craftsmanship. I mean, you know, this is just a very impressive, of course, on its face is very impressive. This is really not the website that I want. Let's back up a little bit. Okay. And let me see here. Jobs available. That's the actual website. Let's go over here and click on let's go over here and click on the images, okay, and look at the images. And I mean, you know, there's one picture. I mean, inside and out, it's awe-inspiring, okay. And of course, if we get some close-up shots here, these are some of the pictures I was looking at yesterday. Let me see if I can get a slideshow of sorts. Okay. And so let's look at, let's go ahead and look at this picture. Okay. And let me see if we can get a big, good picture here going. If this will load. No, we got something else entirely there. Okay. Let's try to visit this page. No. Okay. So if you Google Art Encounter, okay, you can see a lot of the pictures there of the complex. And what I want to iterate, what's this? Creationist Ken Ham's Ark. Atheist exposes the Ark. Okay. FFRF.org. Okay, so let's talk about this. I didn't mean to put that on there, but it's, shall we say, apropos, because what we're going to talk about today is what we have in this ark inside and out, and with the supposed dinosaurs that he brought onto the earth, or the ark, and all of this stuff. What we have is Ken Ham's thesis that the ark built by Noah was a engineering feat far beyond anything, 17th century moving forward. Okay. What we want to talk about today is the huge issue with floating box versus boat. All right? Floating box versus boat. Boat is something entirely different than what's going on in the book of Genesis. Okay? When you get into the realm of boat, you're looking at an engineered vessel, okay, that doesn't depend on simple buoyancy, but the engineering, what it would take with the kind of materials that, planks. So, the thesis is, according to Ken Ham, that this boat, which wasn't a boat, is this engineering marvel. All right? And of course, this is going to give atheists all kinds of fodder in argument against this concept. The concept that we have here with the Ark Encounter is far beyond the realm of reality of what's going on in the book of Genesis. It's something entirely different. What's being represented by the Ark Encounter is a ship, not just a boat, but a ship that is designed to be able to travel over oceans. Okay? Now, a floating device and a ship are two totally different things. Or, if you will, pontoon, I think is the correct pronunciation, versus ship. Okay? Ships made to move through the water, okay, depend on really super duper in-depth engineering and water displacement. A floating device just depends on buoyancy. We're going to look at how, and then of course the controversy that you get into is this proposition by the Ark Encounter, again, that the Ark was this incredible engineering masterpiece, all right? And then they, hired master shipbuilders to do an evaluation of the Ark, and indeed would it have held up, against the forces of the displaced water and held together and been able to float and hold all of these people and blah blah blah. So basically what this concept does is create far more questions than it does answers. All right. Once one quits listening to the Bible scholars and the so-called educated experts and just reads the Bible to the folks it was written to, who was the Bible written to? Everyday folks that, are all on all kinds of levels and places in life and abilities of life. All right? More than not, the problem with the Bible is its simplicity, not its complexity. For the most part, if people just read the Bible and simply let the words stand on their own, simply let the words say what they say, there is no problem whatsoever eventually understanding the Bible thoroughly. And basically the way you understand the Bible is the way I'm having to study pharmaceuticals right now. You don't read all of this stuff and worry about retaining everything that you're reading and blah blah blah. Basically, and this is something that I've got to remember in the studying the pharmacology, You're picking up foundational building blocks that are easy to remember, okay? And then as far as the information that you build on in pharmacology, it's built on those basics, and you just keep plowing away, and eventually it comes, okay? You know, it's just like this last Super Bowl. Both teams couldn't score, but they just had to keep grinding and grinding and grinding, and then finally something broke, okay? Another thing that I want to point out about this ark, all right, and you can get your most favorable pictures here by Googling and whatnot. All of this business going on at the top, okay? There's a fairly good picture of it. All of this business going on at the top. But of course, they would have had to have been able to see out and be able to walk around on the deck and have ventilation. So, you know, the thesis also is that you got all of this action going on up here too. And then you look at the ark and how it's designed and all that awesome craftsmanship and the bow and the whole boatness and shipness of it all. Very impressive inside and out. And then some of the inside pictures are stinking hilarious, you know. Of course it shows Noah and his family with a pulpit and, you know, like worshiping every Sunday, I guess, or back then it would have been Sunday or whatever. Of course there had to be church on the ark, you know, of course. So, okay, and again, unfortunately, by posing it as itself, Ken Ham and the Ark Encounter, as an apologetics for Christianity. Listen, folks, all this does is give the atheist and the naysayers fodder. It's all it does. And I stumbled across this atheist website and what they say about the ark. I'll click on that. Atheist exposes ark. All right. An atheist shoots a commercial at let's just click on the link and see if we can bring it up. An atheist shoots a commercial at creationist Ken Ham Ark Encounter. Now that might be interesting. Oh, there's actually a video here. Okay. Let's watch it. What do you say?
If the religious right remains unchecked, science-based education will be history. This will be the classroom of the future. Ken Ham's Ark Park in northern Kentucky, built with millions in taxpayer subsidies on land that the government basically gave to Ham. Thousands of people have already visited this park, which lets in public school children for $1. All to learn that dinosaurs boarded a fantasy boat along with horses and cows. The Freedom from Religion Foundation has worked to ensure that no public school will bring its students to this park, which refuses to hire LGBTQ or non-Christians. But that's just the beginning. The religious right is working to ensure that any mention of facts like evolution and climate change are kept out of our public school classrooms and textbooks. They want to funnel millions of our school children and billions of our taxpayer dollars into private Christian schools. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is fighting these dangerous abuses of power. Become a member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation today to protect science-based education and keep religion out of our public schools.
All right, so that's an interesting commercial. Of course, climate change is a farce, so they're just as guilty as Ken Ham at putting farces out there. As far as the Ark Encounter thing being subsidized with taxpayer money, this, that, and the other, I don't know if that's true or not, but I certainly wouldn't agree with that because, like, it's not the truth, okay? So in 50% of his concerns there, I would probably have to side with the atheist, But, you know, truth is truth. And as my grandmother says, what did she used to say? Right's right, and right doesn't wrong anybody. So I'm okay with about 50% of that. All right, so let's get into what's really going on with the ark. And I've just scratched the surface. So what I'm just going to give you today is a surface scratching. And so you might be asking, Paul, what does all of this ark stuff have to do with the church lie and the premise of the church lie? Well, really everything, okay? And I mean, in the next edition, we are definitely going to have to put a chapter in there or an addendum in there in regard to, you know, this whole ark thing, okay? That and historical precedent. All right. So let's have a look at all of this. We got the Ark encounter version. That the Noah's Ark was this fantastic engineering spectacle. Okay, and and with the on top of this great ship. You know, you've got this compound with doors and windows where they would have been able to walk around on the deck of the ship and blah, blah, blah. And so, what is our thesis? Well, our thesis is this, okay? The ark was a rectangular box, all right? Built out of logs, okay, pretty much uniform and sealed all the way around with one square foot window on top and a door towards the top that was sealed. The only thing that I would agree with as far as this ark thing is the door being towards the top and, ramps going up to the door. Now, how Noah could have done it, he could have built his big old huge box, okay, over like a hill or off the side of the hill to where, or build up dirt or whatever, to where, on one side of the ark you just have a hill, okay, and then the ark sat over the box, sat over the side of this hill, so you like go into the top floor. There were 3 levels, just like on a road. Or it could have been an elaborate ramp built out of logs, okay? So, I am not going to get into the word study aspect. I'll be adding some more videos to this. I did quite a bit of word study on Genesis chapter 6, and it's interesting to note, and it'll make my point here. In the Hebrew, there is just as good of argument as any argument out there, and I'm going to be adding a video to this later on. There's just as much of an argument that's as good as any in regard to word study in Genesis chapter 6, where God comes to Noah and he says, Noah, build a box out of trees. Okay? Build a box out of trees. Alright? So, what do I think, and actually in my study of all of this, I'm pretty convinced because it makes total sense. Okay? And before we go on real quick, oh my goodness. Hold on, folks. All right. Okay. All right, I will be reading something very important has happened in an issue we're dealing with here in the Potter's House, but I will read that later. Past that, let's see if we have any questions or comments. Not yet. Let's go ahead and check Facebook before we move on. Here we go, Facebook. Alright, and let's see what we got here. We might have one. If it'll ever load. Okay, yeah, Andy's got a comment. Thank you, Andy. Okay. Okay, that was as I recall, when they were raising funds for the Ark Encounter, the number they were shooting for was around 14 million. So we're talking 14 millions for this puppy. Okay? And in regard to what that all looks like and its fabulousness, if that's a word, I think it is, what we really have in the Ark, and this is our thesis, is a big, huge rectangular box built out of logs, okay, maybe hewn square beams cut out of trees, more than likely logs, okay, and kind of a dark colored box because it's coated inside and out with tree sap. All right, that's what we got. It would have been pretty cool to look at because of its size. Okay, that would have been totally awesome. It was a little bit under 500 feet long, 45 feet high, which is something like almost a 5-story building, something like that. Pretty tall. All right, and then so just a big square log box with a sealed up door towards the top, and then on the very top you got like a something like an 18-inch by 18-inch square hole. Now we are going to play a game today, all right, and there's a prize, all right, and I'm not going to give the answer, okay, for those of you who want to email us at mail@tank.online, for those of you who want to email us and tell me why, okay, tell me why the Ark was designed, okay, so that you couldn't see out, all right? So like with Ken Ham and his Ark Encounter, what is the problem with the compound on top with the doors and windows and the roof and all of that? Well, the problem with that is it's abundantly clear from reading in the book of Genesis that the 8 individuals inside of the ark could not see out, period, anywhere, okay? Noah's got to put a bird out the little hole in the top to see if the bird comes back or not. If the bird doesn't come back, obviously it's got some land to hang out on. If the bird does go back, there wasn't any dry land or a tree to light on, okay? At any rate, okay, they couldn't see out. So you've got this sealed, rectangular, big old honkin' box built out of logs, all right, with one little window and top, okay, with, a hatch that was sealed up until Noah opened it. If you can email me and tell me why God would design it that way, Okay? It is a free book, none other, a free copy of the Church Lie and the Biblical Alternative. Okay? Free copy for you. Okay? So that's mail@tank.online, or post a comment on the blog. Okay? If you got trouble for some reason, your email gets biased or something, post someplace or say I sent you an email. We use an email forwarding deal, and sometimes it doesn't work. But your answer can't be public, or then everybody will know. Okay, so email us, and if you get it right, we'll email you back and ask for your address and send you a free book. Okay, so why would God design it that way? This big old honking box built out of logs, pitch or tree sap inside and out, okay, and only one little hatch and top, and they can't see out, people. They can't see out. All right? Again, Noah's got to open up the hatch and put two different birds out there to accomplish two different criteria so that he knows whether, there's dry land or anything out there or not. Okay? So let's talk about this. Again, the reason why the ark wasn't an engineered spectacle is pretty simple. So let's go back to Paul's passing thoughts, and let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this video first.
In lesson 3.4, you can put a small piece of clay on one end of a balance and a tea light candle on the other. Just be sure that the clay weighs less than the candle. So when kids see that the candle weighs more than the clay, take both and put them in some water, and kids will see that the candle floats and the clay sinks. So the question is, why did the heavier one, the candle, float, and the lighter one, the clay, sink? So we want kids to begin to apply the idea of density to the context of sinking and floating. Eventually, we want students to see that the candle floated because it's less dense than water, and the clay sinks because it's more dense than water. And we also want them to see that the reason why the candle is less dense and the clay is more dense has to do with the molecules that they're made of compared to water molecules. So one way to have students compare the density of water to the density of wax is to compare the weight of equal volumes. So if you put a tea light candle in its little aluminum container on one side of the balance, and take the candle out and just have the container on the other side, so you'll have equal volumes, you can fill this side, this container, with water. So you're comparing a volume of water to an equal volume of wax. And you'll see that the water weighs more than an equal volume of wax. Therefore, water must be more dense, because that's the definition of density, is mass per unit volume. If you compare the same volume, the one that's more massive must be more dense. So the question then is, why is water more dense than wax? Well, one way to answer it is to look at the molecules that wax and water are made from. Wax is made of carbon and hydrogen. Those are pretty light. Hydrogen is the lightest of all atoms, and carbon is pretty light too. And water is also made of hydrogen, but oxygen instead of carbon. Oxygen is a little smaller and a little heavier than carbon. So based on the atoms that make up water compared to the atoms that make up wax, water should be more dense. Well, another big reason is that water molecules are packed more closely than the molecules that make up the wax. So it makes sense that water is more dense. Then we had students put clay in one of the tea light candle containers and water in the other. And it's obvious that the clay is much heavier than an equal volume of water. And for the exact same reason as we talked about before. Here, the clay is made from pretty heavy atoms, aluminum, silicon, packed very closely together. It makes sense the clay would be more dense than water. So when you compare equal volumes, the clay side of the balance goes down. Now, clay is more dense than water, but lots of teachers do an activity where they make a clay boat. So why is it that if you take one ball of clay and flatten it out into a pancake and then build it up like into a bowl kind of shape, you can make it float? Well, the reason for that is that this shape of clay actually displaces a lot more water than this shape of clay. If you put this in water, it'll displace about 50% more than the same amount of clay in a ball shape. So when you get to a volume that's big enough and it displaces enough water, it'll float. In fact, the key is to get the volume large enough so it displaces a mass of water that's equal to the mass of the object, then it'll float. There's another way to analyze this whole idea of sink and float in a more physics kind of way through referring to the buoyant force. Now, just really quickly, we have a teacher background information at this link right here with some information about the buoyant force. That there's, on any submerged object, the force below it is greater than the force above it, so there's a net upward force called the buoyant force on any object. And you can read this to see what that has to do with sinking and floating. If you're in an NGSS state, the performance expectation MSPS1-1 says develop models to describe the atomic composition of simple molecules and extended structures. So they want students to develop models to describe atoms and molecules so they understand their structures. But kids have seen water and wax and clay, and they see those atoms and they have a particular composition as molecules, all within the context of density. The foundation boxes for this performance expectation, you can see that the students are supposed to develop a model to describe phenomena, and that they plan and carry out investigations. That's all done in lesson 3.4. Substances are made from different types of atoms. We've looked at that with water and clay and wax, and they understand that each pure substance has a characteristic physical and chemical property, in this case physical property of density, based on the size, mass, and arrangement of the atoms. And if we look at cross-cutting concepts, scale, proportion, and quantity, students use a microscopic or submicroscopic scale of atoms and molecules to understand the macroscopic
so enough of that.
And characteristic of density.
The 2 points that I wanted to make is on that is that clay in a ball will sink to the bottom because it's more dense than water. Okay. Logs are what we call buoyant. Logs are less dense than water. Wood logs are less dense than water because they float. Okay? This next thing I want to look at here, and I put it well, let's look at this first, okay? I'm gonna click on that so that it's nice and big for us, in picture form. So you got this problem here. Hold on here, and I'm gonna have to make it bigger. Control. Here we go. See if I can get this a little bit bigger. Well, I can't read it because my laptop is too small here. So basically, the long and the short of this problem here to students is the flotation of a log is going to vary depending on how dense it is. So this particular log is floating at 50%. And the question is, another log that's bigger than that log is cut from the same tree, what will it be its flotation percentage, or how much of the log will be above water? Answer, still 50%, because the log was cut from the same tree and had the same density, okay? Or something like that. I hope that's right. All right? So, let's talk about the buoyancy of logs. All right? Then we've got this. Buoyancy helps explain why some objects sink and others float. If the buoyant force is greater than its height, if the buoyant force is greater than its weight, the object floats. If the buoyant force is less, then the object will sink. All right. Then it's got a displaced water weighs less than ball or hull. Displaced water weight equals hull weight. Okay. And then it'll float. So like ships are made out of iron and metal and steel and aluminum, and those are materials that aren't buoyant, right? Well, that's where you get into the necessary engineering so that you've got enough displaced water in the right places so that these massive ships will float, plus be able to move efficiently through the water, okay? And then we have, then we have, there we go. Then we have another chart there that's the actual, if you're smart enough in algebra and math, of the, math that you can use to figure out, buoyancy. And there it is. 15% of a log floats above the surface of the ocean. What is the density of that particular wood? And there you go, folks. There's the mathematical formula. Have at it. But now, I've said this yesterday, and I'll say it again. The home fellowship movement could have our own Ark encounter, but it could be like a virtual reality video or something, where God's people could put their heads together and put together, a virtual reality Ark where people wouldn't have to get in their cars and spend all kinds of money to come for a field trip, all right? So, what's my point in all of this? Well, let's start with this simple fact, okay? Where are all my pictures, by the way? Ooh. Okay. We are lacking, let me see here. We've got that link, but let me see here. I'm missing a picture. Okay? I'll have to post it later on, but it's a very important picture. Hold on here just a second. I'll just have to tell you about it. Okay? There we go. Let's do, there we go. Back to normal there. Maybe I'm missing it because of that. Yeah, I'm missing an important picture. Okay? But I'll put the link up there later on so that you can see it. Okay, but in my hurriedness, I failed to get that picture up there. However, I do have this one, and that is that link right underneath the video is an article about the runaway log cabin floating down the Peel River. All right, why is that important? Because the thing never did sink. Why? Even though water got inside the cabin, the thing still floated. In fact, some general store or something along the bank actually tied it up and more rains came or something, and the ropes broke, and it just kept floating down the river. All right. So here we have a log cabin that's floating. It won't sink. Why? Because all of the logs that it's built with are buoyant. Okay? The inside of the thing is filled up with water, so there's no displacement, but yet it floats. The roof is not underwater. Okay? Why? Because all of the materials that the log cabin is built with are less dense than the water. In order for it to float, displacement isn't even necessary. If you got a guy up on the roof sitting, for all practical purposes, you got a good boat. All right? So that's an illustration there. Now, but Paul, what if you just got a massive amount of logs tied together? I had the picture, and I'll put the link back up later on, okay? And we may do some cleanup on this on Monday. But, and of course, we know how do logging companies, especially in the 1800s, how did they transport massive amounts of logs from where they were logging along rivers? How did they transport them down to the mill? They floated them down the river, right? No matter how big they were. Okay? So logs are buoyant. And I've got the picture that I failed to post was these big huge logs that were tied together in a big bundle. Hundreds of them chained together like in a big roll, just a big roll of logs. Guess what? The whole thing is floating, even in shallow water. And I failed to post that, but I'll post it a little bit later on. I'll just do a little slideshow there, okay? So, what do I think definitely is going on with the ark, okay? It can be argued there would be, just like in football, if there's a call on the field and there isn't irrefutable proof in the review of the play, you can't overrule the call on the field. Likewise, from my word study in Genesis chapter 6, there's nothing that can outright refute that God came to Noah and said, Noah, build a box out of trees. Okay? Now, I realize it's not trees plural, but it's singular due to the fact that God was telling him what kind of trees to build it out of. Okay? So that's what you got going on here. All right. So, my theory is, my contention is that the ark could have been built by 8 people easily in the 75 to 100 years that it took, easily. The construction was simple, that even way back then, it took very little engineering, okay, could have been built easily in 75 years by 8 people, and they would have had access to the tools to hewn the logs down. Now, they might have been square beams. They might have taken trees, cut them down, and hewn them into square logs. Okay? That's very possible. But here's my chart. Okay? And basically what I'm going to do is turn my projector off Okay. Let's see if that, yeah, okay. So what I want to do, I want to hold this up, okay? And you get the gist of what I've got there, all right? Here's a end cutaway view of the ark, all right? This big thick line here is, you know, a water level, so to speak. Let's look at what we got going on here in the last 6 minutes or so. It wouldn't have mattered too much what the top was made of, but let's look at what we've got here, okay? Granted, these might have been hewn square beams, all right? So basically, what we've got is even if these logs weren't sealed inside and out with pitch, they're going to float. So basically, irregardless of the fact that you've got a massive amount of logs, okay, all of these logs are buoyant, okay? So it's going to float no matter how big it is, no matter how many logs you use, due to the fact that every one of those logs is buoyant. And I got a sneaking suspicion that God told Noah to build it out of a type of a tree that trust me, God knows density versus water on all the trees he created. It's a safe bet, okay? So basically, you probably got the most buoyancy, most buoyant wood out there. So no matter how many of these you have, it's gonna float, all right? Then take into consideration that it's sealed inside and out with tree sap, inside and out, okay? And you could put extra in there. Now, how would they have put these logs together, okay? Well, with dowel rods, okay? With dowel rods. And how dowel rods work is, let me see here. Yeah, let's get this. So how dowel rods work, and I didn't put the cap on my doohickey here, on my marker, so I'll have to revive that somehow. Let's use blue, okay? And so you got a log, okay? You got a log. And again, they could have been beams. So basically, let's say you got two logs on top of each other, okay? So what you do, okay, you either have something on the inside that connects them together, okay, like a board, a hewn down board, or you just do it from the top down, log to log, and you stagger it. But basically what you do is you bore a hole, okay, through your two logs, and then you get a round wooden nail that's formed, round, and it's just a little bit bigger than the hole that you hewn through those logs. And then what you do, you force that round wooden nail, or what we call a dowel rod, you just pound it in there with a big hammer of some sort. And trust me, folks, Andy knows this because I think he does some furniture building, okay? Stuff held together with dowel rods, especially if you shim it. And what's that mean? Well, if they did like a board on the inside and dowed it into the side of the logs to hold them together, basically what you do, let's do it this way. Basically what you do, you got your dowel rod that goes through, okay, and then you split the dowel rod, okay, at the top, and then you take like a shim, okay, and you beat it in to expand the dowel rod, and then you're dealing with some really super tight stuff, okay? So, in wrapping up here, okay, here's your water line, but you've got all of this buoyancy in every log or hewn beam, okay? But then you got it sealed inside and out, but then what else do you have going for you on top of all of that? Displacement of water, okay? So along with the fact that all of these logs are buoyant, okay, and sealed inside and out, okay, basically you also got displaced water working in your favor, okay? So basically the long and the short of it is this. This thing is a mega hyper flotation device. Just a